satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth. Welcome to Deja Vu, Satellite Haiku.
I'm MiLo.
I'm Sean.
So anyway,
AKA Dispatches from the Kali Yuga, but I don't know if we're gonna. I think we might be a little more, a little warmer today, a little less in the dystopia mode. We'll see.
oh yeah, no, for sure. No, I like that as a
Because
subtitle.
you were talking about grandparenthood and constant in the variant, and then our recording crapped out. So let's recap that thread.
Yeah, I mean, really, I guess my sort of the inquiry after this trip is watching my. So I look at my grandson in San Diego.
Wait. Let me recap what you said before your recording crapped out. So you have 2 grandchildren now.
Yep.
One was an IVF child who is not genetically your lineage, and the other is your genetic material being carried on. So this latter child resembles your family, resembles your daughter.
Yeah, it looks like a clone of my daughter.
Yeah.
Ironically,
and so you were talking about you were using that as sort of a springboard for some thoughts on the constant and the variant. So yeah.
Ironically,
now back to you.
Ironically, my first grandchild is literally like a terrifyingly close clone of their of their mom, of their
your daughter's partner.
Yeah, and they are a non-binary person who identifies that way. So I don't know exactly what the names of but yeah, so it's like the egg of my daughter's spouse.
Yeah.
The child was brought to term by my daughter, and then is an absolute, like a literal clone. Like it's almost terrifying. Like my kids didn't look exactly like me, but I mean, it must be very interesting to see, this person who is a clone of you. Anyway, so the constant and the variant. So I'm looking at my daughter, and I'm watching her. And interestingly enough, my daughter was extremely shy, like just bone-rattlingly, painfully shy for years. Like would hide behind your leg, and I thought if I teased her, I could make her tougher. It was like a really dumb, thing. But and we used to make a joke. We would say things like, "Oh, $30,000 of therapy later, you'll be fine." They were crying about something, And anyway, watching my daughter raise her son, who looks identical to her, but he doesn't seem to be. He seems to be. He's in the bath, and instead of crying, he just looks curious, like, wonder what's happening. I'm all wet and I'm uncomfortable. Like it just. And so he's clearly not the same child,
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to think, like, I don't know. I guess in general, I'm just thinking more and more about how we are both constant because we are genetic material that is sort of unchanging except for the epigenetic part. And then we have these influences that are from the family, from the way we were raised, from our school, the way we were treated when we were, and we develop these coping mechanisms. And so we're sort of like half constant, half variant, like we're, and it just feels so interesting to watch that happening from the grandparent perspective. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that was that has, I haven't thought about it for a while, but I often used to think about that and tell people that is one of my favorite things about being a parent is just, and I've heard like anthropologists and academics, kind of talk about this as well. Just like getting that view of nature versus nurture, like watching your kids do things that you didn't teach them, that you go, where did that come from? You know what I mean? Like behaviors you start to see, or you start to see them figure out the world in a certain way, and you watch what their sort of like theory of the world is, and you watch that change. You see how they explain things to themselves, or how they try to figure out things or navigate certain situations, and it's just endlessly fascinating to watch new people in the world like try to learn the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other day I was thinking about just like a really simple example. I don't know why I thought of this, but I was thinking about watching my daughter one time get really mad about something when she was like pre-verbal almost, like barely talking, just walking. and she stomped her feet, right? Like in anger, just stamped her feet like a cartoon.
Oh, well, yeah.
And I remember thinking like, it just made me think of like gorillas and grizzly bears and like beating your chest or like charging at your, there's just these, it's like it just struck me as like this physical thing that like, you don't learn that. It just
Yeah.
comes from inside your genes in our cavemen somehow.
Yeah.
Like stomping your feet when you're mad is just a thing that your body does. And I
Totally.
just thought, wow, that's so interesting because adults don't do that. Like you essentially learn not to do that, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. You're taught.
otherwise you look ridiculous. You
Yep.
look like a child,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. It's socially
But maybe our
unacceptable.
caveman ancestors, like as adults, probably still did that because there wasn't like this weird stigma to like, bro, what are you doing? Right.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. There's a
you just
particular thing where
let
you
your
lift
body
your
do
hands
what your
and you
body does.
lift one foot and then slam it back down. And that's
Yeah.
such a universal, I mean,
And
it
just
feels,
the idea that it's universal was really striking to me in that moment. Like, that's so interesting. But like, that's just like off the top of my head. That's just one random moment I happened to be thinking about the other day. But there's so many things when you watch your kids, like in the bath experiencing water, and you watch the child experience that, and you kind of like, because you have developed theory of mind, you're putting yourself in that little being's mind in that moment, going, what are they thinking about this water situation? Sorry, there's a truck outside now, a delivery truck. I have my windows open, so there's some background noise.
it's not
Apologies.
coming through to my headphones, so it's probably being,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
squeezed out. But yeah, yeah, that's pretty fascinating. I mean, I was a
You
huge,
feel like a little anthropologist in your house, right? Like
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
watch these little monkeys,
Yeah.
these little like this other little culture you're watching develop. Like, or
I
whatever, right?
always felt like being a parent was like a big, huge, long experiment. Like a
Yeah.
20-year experiment before they go off to college. And you're just watching them develop. And
Yeah, there's like behavioral psychologists. I definitely have heard more than one kind of on a podcast or an interview, essentially using their own children as an experiment, not like testing them, but just observing,
yeah,
right? And using those observations in their work because it's super interesting to see how people develop. And kind of like twins, right? You get these twins give you this interesting lens on human development and nature versus nurture, right?
yeah.
And separated twins especially. And then but just kids in general, like that's the canvas that the world is being painted on, and so you get to watch it as a scientist almost. Like you do feel like a scientist watching it.
When my
Yeah.
former father-in-law, like the grandfather of my daughters, he
Yeah.
he was a federal parole officer, and so he had to get a master's degree. I think in criminal psychology.
Mhm.
But his thesis, he used his 4 children. Maybe
Mhm.
there were only 3 at the time, but he had
Yeah.
these 3 children, and he was comparing the effectiveness of like sort of Christian, sort of a Christian perspective where you're supposed to sort of love thy neighbor and do like nice things to your neighbor versus capitalism, versus like market pressure or reward based. You behave this way, you get a reward. You behave that way, you get punished. And
Yeah.
and at the end he said, "I was
Somewhat argue that second one is Christian of a certain kind.
sure."
Anyway,
Anyway,
sorry.
I mean, Jesus throwing over the tables.
Yeah.
I
No,
don't know.
I just mean like the evangelicals
Oh,
are
sure,
very
sure.
into
I'm sure. Like what?
hell and heaven and hell and punishment and
I'm sure.
judgment and all that.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
So
go ahead.
anyway,
Yeah.
that's the interesting point.
Yeah.
And that's another sort of problem that we have on the planet with religion is that this whole it's sort of smushing back and forth of that belief system.
But in a way, it's a weird merger of capitalism and
yeah.
ideology with Christian ideology.
So,
but go ahead.
So in
Sorry,
his
that's a weird,
thesis,
that's
his
a
sort of
side
his
avenue.
his conclusion in the thesis was, wow, based on the parameters that I set for the experiment, Christianity face planted, and capitalism was the only thing that worked for my kid, like with my kids. In other words,
Yeah,
like you couldn't just
Yeah.
tell them to be nice to their neighbor and then they were. Like you had to like enforce it, And that would,
I mean, I feel like there's so many obvious problems with the with the
The
Christian
premise.
side of
Oh, the
that.
Christian side of that. Yeah. And I don't.
I mean, just like I like to just put the Christian label on what essentially amounts to permissive parenting, uh, and just decide that permissive parenting is Christian, but like some sort of having some structure is not.
No, and so again, I feel bad because I've talked at length with him about it, the thesis, but I've never read
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
So like I've never sat down and read from the beginning to
Sure,
the end.
sure.
So
I mean, I know you're summarizing it, but like I think of I don't know why it made me think of like this what do they call it? Gentle parenting, right?
oh yeah,
And there's a lot of people that you've heard of gentle parenting, right? Like that
I've
there's
never
maybe
studied it, but yeah,
it's kind of risen up after your kids were already grown, but
okay.
like there's this school of parenting that's developed in the last, I don't know, 15 years that has been given the label gentle parenting. But a lot of people misunderstand that and they kind of just apply that label to any form of basically permissive free for all type parenting, right?
Sure, sure, I see.
And so gentle parenting really what it really is um it's accounting for the fact that your children are it's number one treating them as human beings. Like
Mhm,
there's a lot of parenting that really is about compliance versus like, you know what I mean?
mhm.
And you it's just about following rules and you punish people for being outside the rules um and then there's just like no acknowledgement. There's like sort of no awareness that your kids have the same sort of human limitations that we do. So like when they're hungry, they're going to be more likely to lose their temper, right? And to
Right.
be dysregulated, just like
Yep.
any human being is when they're hungry.
Yep.
We get hangry and we're more prone to be triggered by things when we're hangry, right?
Yep.
But somehow kids don't get that leeway a lot of time.
Right.
Like
Yep.
that they're just not given the sort of the benefit of the doubt that all humans are given. Like, oh, we all have certain sometimes we're stressed and we're more triggered when we're stressed or we're hungry or we're tired. Like, so I think there's a lot of parents that don't really kind of they don't even seem to have an awareness of like the fact that their kids have all the same sort of human weaknesses, limitations, vulnerabilities, needs that any other human has, that they're not just these robots that you can control. Number one. And number two, um, that your kids have a brain that is in development compared to an adult brain, right? Like
Yep.
they haven't developed the prefrontal cortex. And so there's certain capacities that kids just simply don't have. So when you're trying to teach them things, like you use teachable moments, you have to be aware that like kids have a limited ability to understand like cause and effect before a certain age.
Right.
They have a limited ability to understand what's in other people's minds. Like they don't have
Right.
a theory of mind before a certain age. So when a parent is telling a toddler like that's not very nice to Johnny, like what would Johnny think about that when you do that? Right? Like
Right.
that kid he's 3 years old. He doesn't have any ability to even grapple or even like put himself in somebody else's shoes at all, like zero, right?
And,
So
and
like
and
parents
that's
don't understand.
frontal lobe executive function. That is, the frontal lobe continues to grow until around 26. So the
Exactly.
idea
So
that a teenage boy, you
s-
say,
s-
think about the other kids that you might hit them in the car. Like you're like, what? What do you mean?
yeah, exactly. So gentle parenting is really about like it's kind of just being very empathetic and and understanding of where your child is at, like meeting
Mm,
them where they are,
right.
right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you don't have boundaries and you don't set rules and you don't discipline them. It's just a matter of like the way you discipline them it has to take into account these things, like the fact that they're human, the fact that they're developing, the fact whatever, right? I'm simplifying it a little bit. But then what happens is people say, "Oh, well, gentle parenting is when you just kind of let your kids do anything and you never punish them," right? Well,
Mm,
that's so there's this difference between and the people who are advocates of quote unquote gentle parenting would call that second thing permissive parenting, and they
right.
like take great make great effort to make the distinction between permissive parenting and gentle parenting. So anyway,
My
that's when I said permissive parenting when you in your context
all
of
right.
like
My
that's what I was talking about. Yeah.
like I went through this when my youngest daughter was 18 months old. So maybe my oldest daughter was 4 or 5. I
Mhm.
sort of stumbled across the Rudolf Steiner Waldorf school system,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we were doing a play group like once a week. But that's when
Hmm.
like the teachers would start to introduce Rudolf Steiner concepts of child development and parenting, and
Hmm.
it was awkward for me. For instance, like they had this belief system, especially that you obviously don't watch television until 7 years old. You're not supposed to play with iPhones and things. Back there weren't iPhones back then, but um, and they had this whole theory around it,
Right. Like limits on sort of the amount of technology
and
that is in their
it
lives
was based on
and the types of
biology.
technology.
It
Yeah.
literally, like, what sold me on it was, as a filmmaker, they were like, well, you understand, if you go into Photoshop, but if you go into the darkroom, you have the blackest blacks and the whitest whites of the paper, but it's not that dynamic range is not wide enough to represent the world. In other words,
Hmm.
like on your computer screen, the black is really like dark gray, and the
Hmm.
white is not sunlight. So like your brain is interpreting optical signals. If you stare at a computer screen for 8 hours a day when you're 5, you reduce the true dynamic range of the optical sort of interpretation system. I can understand that, right? So same with
I mean,
audio.
I can understand that argument. I don't know how
Scientific it is,
rigorously
but yeah.
that's been actually tested, but it makes sense logically. Yeah.
There's a guy named Joseph Chilton Pierce. We can look that up, and he's done a lot of
Hmm.
testing around it. And it just looking at that, you stimulate the brain with a view. If you go outside,
Hmm.
like, and you look at what the brain is seeing in terms of its blacks and its whites
Hmm.
compared to a computer
No, it
screen.
makes
Yeah,
total
yeah.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
and so his thing is, and maybe it's like one of those like Kierkegaard sort of things where you're like, hey, you don't know if there's a heaven or hell, but you may as well not take the
Hmm.
risk and just be a nice person. Like it might be like just go outside and look at the sky rather than the computer screen when you're 5, as much as you
It
can.
just seems intuitively better
Yeah.
also.
So
But
they had the
anyway,
thing with audio,
yeah.
like if you play them a CD, like
Hmm.
it's been sampled, it's been compressed, it's been going through a speaker, whereas a
Right.
human voice is, a human voice.
Hmm. Hmm.
So anyway, and as someone who was creating children's books and wanting to be, I was
Hmm.
an illustrator back then,
Hmm.
and I had written a children's book. I wanted to be a children's book illustrator and writer, and they were like, no picture books.
Hmm.
You have to tell the story, and then their mind has to generate an image, and that's way to
Hmm.
to sort of practice the muscle of creativity. Like
Hmm.
if you show a picture to someone that I always used to joke and say a 27-year-old Disney animator's idea of a princess,
Hmm.
and then the child is like, oh, that's a princess, as opposed to there was this princess, she was so beautiful, and the child has
Hmm.
to think. Just imagine the difference between what they would come up with versus the
Yeah.
27-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. But at the same time, the world kind of has parameters for what like a common understanding of things, right? So it's interesting to so for example, like with the word like princess, there is the Disney version, but you could imagine reading a book where the princess looks very different in one book, in some illustrator's version of it, right?
Sure.
Versus another. And so your kid, by being exposed to those versus just a totally blank canvas, is developing like it's kind of like the story of AI trying to learn what a dog was, right? Like there were early experiments. There were two approaches to AI, which was one was coders kind of basically writing parameters for what a dog. Well, a dog has 4 legs, and a dog, right? And so, but then then the computer would fail to distinguish between a dog and a cat. It would say, "Oh, that cat is a dog," right?
Right.
Like it would
Sure.
look at a picture of a cat, and
Yeah.
the AI would go, "That's a dog, of course," right? It has all the things that you put in as these parameters. And then the other method, of course, was just dumping a ton of pictures of dogs into an AI and saying, "These are dogs," right? Like figure it out. Um, and um,
Which is fascinating
and
because
so it's
there's a
yeah.
keystone nuance differential between a cat and a dog that
Mhm.
has to be determined, and we intuitively just know. But
Like
how
you
does the
figure it out by over time. You've seen enough dogs and cats, and you see
yeah.
people. And maybe when you were a tiny toddler, you would said dog, and somebody would have said, "No, that's a cat," and you go, "Oh, okay." And then your brain makes some adjustments, right? And that's what the AI is doing. So, like, I don't know. Part of me made me think of that, like when you're just having your child When you just have the words and your child is formulating the picture, it's almost like that first approach where you're like giving them the parameters in verbal speak,
Huh.
and they may be developing something in their brain that, yeah, it's a picture, but like there's something useful about also exposing them to all the different common
Yeah.
understandings of what that concept is, so that then they see all those in their brain.
And a
So
funny,
I'm always like a little bit resistant to anything that sounds a little bit fundamentalist to me.
oh yeah, no,
We should always do it this way,
Waldorf
follow
is
this method.
super fundamentalist. And so like my sister-in-law, who later on on to become a Waldorf school teacher of special ed. But like in
Hmm.
the time when I had the kids in the elementary, like the kindergarten, she used to
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
like, "Oh my God, it's like they're being raised by wolves in a closet under the stairs. Like they're going to go out into the world and they're going to be like, ah, what's this? Ah, a computer. Ah, like they won't know how to be in the world." And I was like, I don't think so.
Hmm.
And then later on, I remember handing my daughter a Razor phone. She was probably 6.
Yeah,
And, she could type T9 in about
yeah.
2 minutes.
Hmm.
And it took me like 3 days to learn it. And I was like, damn, man, it's like that thing about, what's that term, when it's like a meme that's a mnemonic, something that is
Mnemonic.
something that
No, sorry.
happens
Oh, mimetic.
it's something that happens, and then all of a sudden that generation, everyone can
Oh, yeah,
do
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
there's a name for that.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Like,
but it's
yeah,
like a
yeah.
global, it's like this phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon that
Hmm.
people have noted that somehow all
Somehow, like even across cultures, everybody learned to do this one
same
thing at the
thing at
same
the same
time, roughly
time
the same
at
time
a
in human
particular
history,
point
that
in
kind of
human
thing.
history. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So like my
Hmm.
daughter had been sheltered from all electronics for
It's like,
6
oh,
years.
fermented foods became a thing in
Yeah,
China and, Italy around the same time or
right.
whatever, something like that,
Totally.
that
Yeah,
kind of
totally.
thing.
So anyway, so my sister-in-law is shouting like she's got, they're being raised by wolves in a closet under the stairs. And
Yeah,
and it didn't turn out that way. Like it was obviously sheltering them, and
yeah.
one thing that I noticed, probably the only sort of obvious thing that I noticed, is that
Hmm.
their attention spans, my daughter's
Yeah.
attention spans compared to the non-Waldorf kids the same age,
Hmm.
were like
Hmm.
50 times longer.
Yeah. I mean,
They literally could sit down
that
and start
totally
playing
makes
the
sense.
drums
I
for
mean,
like 3 hours, and like not, and
yeah, yeah,
another kid
yeah.
would go, dum, 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 what's next? And it was
Right.
like, wow, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I worry about that now in the age of screens for sure. I think
Yeah.
that, I don't, so like, I mean, a lot of it just has to do with parents and what limits parents put on whatever your schooling is doing, right? I don't know. I've been volunteering this last couple of months in my kids' school in the fourth grade classroom, uh, helping out. This is a private school, and it's a Catholic school. But it's a private school; it costs money to go there, right? And then I've been also volunteering in one of the rougher public schools in a fourth grade classroom, and so different, man. It's just like, and just what you're talking about, um, you know, uh, ability to pay attention. Um, in the second classroom, you can just, and I'm speculating, but like it just, like they all have phones. A
Hmm.
lot of them do,
Yep.
like they have to hand in their phones
Oh, that's cool.
and things like that. But like none of the fourth graders at the private school even own a phone, right? Maybe one, right? So like, I think one of them walks home after school, and so like her parents gave her a phone or whatever. But yeah, it's just so different.
I have
I
to
think about that a lot.
I have
Yeah.
to point out, like thinking as I was visualizing that attention span thing,
Hmm.
I personally I'm kind of ADHD or hyperactive, and I can focus like just like a motherfucker. Like I can focus like crazy if I get
Yeah,
into the
like
thing.
ADHD has the two extremes of
Yeah.
like hyperfocus and inability to focus,
And
right?
while the kids were growing up, since before they were born in the early years,
Hmm.
I would sit down and noodle on the guitar for two
Hmm.
hours. Like I would just focus
Yeah,
and
yeah.
nothing else would happen. So in some ways, I was
Hmm.
modeling for them like long, long periods of interactivity with
Hmm.
something in hyper focus, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would paint for say 2 hours at a time without stopping,
yeah.
without doing anything else. So, and it's possible that that's just genetic. Like they just, like me, could hyper focus, and maybe that the other kids I was comparing them to couldn't. You know, it's not entirely clear that it was not looking at screens, that gave them that, or being at the Waldorf school. But one thing I will say that the Waldorf school did that was
I mean, the
phenomenal.
Waldorf school definitely fed that same kind of approach. Like it was on board with that same approach. Like it wasn't a contrast to that.
Right.
It was complementary to that.
Yeah.
So
two things that they did that I think I might have talked about before.
So if nothing else, if it wasn't like the main cause or whatever, the main driver, it was at least complementary. Yeah.
Like one thing that they did since I think kindergarten, they started hand knitting, and then they would knit with knitting needles, and that even the boys would bring the knitting needles.
Yeah.
So that gave them that ability to intake more information per verbal unit during a lecture.
Like, the kids at this public school, they have like slime.
Oh yeah, so anything
that they get to play with a little thing of slime on
spinners,
their desk,
those little spinner things.
It's mainly to help fidget. Yeah, my daughter who has ADHD, like she has a couple fidgets that she gets to use if she needs to.
Nice. So the one thing they did, so in the Waldorf school, really, Rudolf Steiner didn't prescribe anything for up to kindergarten. He wanted the child to be at the house, and just the mom would model cooking and cleaning, like whatever, very traditional. And this is like 1930s Germany, 1925 or something. And then, but one thing
we know what happened to those kids.
Yeah. One thing they did in one thing they did.
They got sent in to be cannon fodder is what happened.
Oof,
anyway, go ahead.
That's true.
Yeah.
One thing they did from grade 1 through grade 8. So they start school in grade 1 in the true Waldorf school. Usually, like in other countries, we just start in like preschool. But anyway, so in grade 1, they have very strict academic prescription or curricula. And
in Waldorf.
Yeah. And one thing they do every spring is they do the first grade play, the second grade play, and they pick a play like, I don't know, St. Francis of Assisi and the Wolf, something like that. And they learn, every child learns the whole play, memorizes it. And then it's like, remember back in like the 80s when on a soap opera, they would, at the beginning of the soap opera, they'd be like, Dr. Levitz is now going to be played by Anton Bauer, and like that person just steps in and plays the role.
Or like you go to the play tonight in this evening's performance.
Yeah. So the teacher literally would say to my daughter, like, you're going to play St. Francis today. And they had to know St. Francis's lines.
Like all of it, yeah.
Oh, the whole play, like that. And it was designed to make them that neuroplasticity and really like teach them how to memorize things in relation to other things. Like it was like almost object-oriented programming for memory. It was really cool. And I was blown away by it. He would literally, they would come in that day when they were going to practice, only in the spring. And they would say, he would just give them a role. And they had to do the play without, any, and they didn't really need a lot of line readings. They just all memorized the play, and they would switch roles fluidly. It was amazing.
That's cool. Yeah.
Very cool. So anyway,
it's so interesting. Like when you think about we've talked about this a little bit, but just, I often think about, I'm bothered by just sort of the purpose of school in some ways, right? Like the purpose of it. And you've touched on this, like you touched on one of the things that I wrestle with sometimes. But so like the purpose of learning a lot of this stuff seems to be to train your kids to become workers, right? In the capitalist machine somehow, right? Essentially that's the end game. And they need to learn a baseline of like reading and math and science and social studies, whatever. Like some of it is pure learning. And so college is where you really see this striking difference between like, like there's certain majors that are really designed to train you for a job, like engineering or medicine or whatever. Like those are majors that are really like the purpose of those as college majors is a job. Yeah. Is a specific job.
Very specialized.
And then there's other majors that are more like building your mind and teaching you things and developing your ability to think and ask questions, and more of the humanities, right? Yeah. And those are not really geared toward a particular, it's like they're geared toward, maybe steering you in eventually into law school or teaching or something like that, but they're not like targeting a particular
Yep.
job in
Yep.
in the world. And but that's true all the way back to the beginning of school. Like, what is the purpose of, like, why do we have? And I get bothered by this every time I wake my kids up and I have to rouse them out of bed, and they don't want to get out of bed, right? And they're tired. And there's a part of me that's like, I just want to let you sleep, like you're a child,
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and then you should wake up and you should go outside and play because you're a child. Like, but no, we live in this fucking world where I have to wake you up and I have to send you to learn shit so that you can make money and have a job and be a cog in a wheel,
Yeah.
and I fucking hate that on some level. And it's interesting, like the thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about like Waldorf and its approach, and like whether it's like being raised by wolves, and like are they gonna be able to make it in the world? And just that phrase, like, make it in the world, like, what that really means is, are they going to be able to participate and contribute to this capitalist machine, right? That's
Yep.
that's kind of what that phrase is implying on like, in one sense anyway. And
And
and I do know, and does seem to be a thing where, like, I've seen some grown Waldorf kids that did struggle, right? Like there comes a point in a lot of our lives, not everybody's life, but a lot of our lives, definitely you and me, I think, and we can see this in a certain swath of people that, like, there's a point as you're becoming an adult, and you start to realize, like, oh shit, I need to make money, right?
mhm.
Like, and then that becomes more acute as you buy a house or like you get locked into like a mortgage, or you have a wife or a husband, or you have a kid, right? It's like, oh, I need to provide food for this being that I just brought into the world, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
there's no choice but to figure out how to find an income in this. Like there's a lot of us that go through this sort of like, I'm going to be whatever I want. I'm going to change
Mhm.
like the world,
Follow your dreams
like
and do. Yeah.
my generation is going to change the world, right? Like, we're not going to buy into this dumb thing that that the grown-ups are part of, right? Like, they built this thing, we're going to make it different. We're going to live differently than they do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so hard. Like, then you get to this disillusioned point where you're just like, oh wait, I actually need a job, and I gotta get on the train. Like, I'm the hobo beside the train right now, and I'm living my free life. And we're, me and my generation, we're sort of on the path to changing this shit. Oh, but now I have a kid,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, it's such a anyway, there's a part of me as I'm raising my kids, like, I don't want to wake you up and send you to this thing to learn the shit to be a cog in a wheel, right?
Right.
At the same time, like, the machine exists. And so, like, if you're not able to be a cog in the machine, then, like, I've known plenty of people who were just lost as adults, right?
Right.
Like, they weren't able to do it. And they also weren't able to find like a groove outside the machine that allowed them to really thrive.
Yep.
So they're just in this weird limbo, lost sort of people. And I've known plenty of people like that. And
Yep.
some of them are brilliant people, and some of the most brilliant people actually seem to have the hardest time, like, jumping on the fucking machine,
Yeah. No, it's
because
true.
they're brilliant people. I remember, like, there was that homeless guy in Bernathen where we grew up,
Ah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but
Barnett's. Barnett's.
Robin,
Robin.
Robin got,
Robin Barnett's.
yeah.
Yeah. He was
And
my
I remember
babysitter. Full
hearing
disclaimer.
stories
He was
about him
my
and how
favorite
brilliant he
babysitter.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember hearing like, oh, he was actually a brilliant guy. He got his PhD, right? Like, there was a guy here in San Francisco who you would see, he was a homeless dude. You would see it, 12 galaxies. He would always carry this sign about the 12 galaxies, like a little bit unhinged, like
Hmm.
crazy somehow conspiracy about 12 galaxies. And I can't remember his name. But anyway, another guy that was just like, then you hear his backstory and like, oh, he's actually brilliant. He worked in aerospace for a while. Like, it does seem like there's a certain pattern where people who are really especially brilliant
Yeah.
somehow have
Yeah.
the hardest time.
For sure, for sure. I do want to go back to the Waldorf thing for one second. Full disclaimer,
Yeah, yeah.
it was really interesting for you to say, when you said to prepare you for the cog. So the reason that the Rudolf Steiner method is called Waldorf school is because the first lecture that Rudolf Steiner, he was commissioned by the boss or the CEO of the Waldorf Astoria cigarette factory to make a school for the children of the workers.
Interesting.
On site, like so that they could come to work, drop their kids off at the school, and then the kids would be at school while they were working on the cigarettes. And so, you know what I mean? So like in some ways what you were describing there is exactly what the boss was like.
I
We
mean,
need
that's
a way
such a
to
perfect thing.
get
It's
the
like
kids
these things are
trained.
juxtaposed.
I'm surprised they didn't have a segment in a curriculum where they rolled cigarettes, you know, like
They probably did back then.
I don't know. But then I'll say this is that one thing he has said in his lectures is
that sounds like a scene from like an episode of South Park or
totally.
something.
It's totally and it's like
that.
Severance or something. It's like, you know,
you can see a flashback scene where they have like the Waldorf school with the kids rolling cigarettes for the factory.
Totally. But then the other thing that the sort of counter to that would be that he said he wanted to instill, as you were talking about, like liberal arts. My parents used to push liberal arts as like, we're teaching you how to think, not how to do something.
Yeah.
And so as a liberal arts major, you should come away with the ability to learn anything quickly.
Yeah.
Or at least, you know, to become proficient in whatever.
And not just how to think and be critical, but like, well, critical thinking is huge, you know, is a huge thing, but also just like, I think the humanities develop your empathy and compassion and curiosity and intellectual humility. Like all those things, you know, I see these bros, these tech bros, you know, the Mark Andreessens of the world who, you know, make some dumb statement about how introspection was invented 400 years ago or some shit. And, you know, like the dude's obviously kind of a sociopath.
Right.
And just like Zuckerberg built a whole fucking fake world because he can't operate like a normal human in this world, right? Like these guys, they could use some humanities.
Yeah, no,
they're not. I mean, like in every sense of the word, they're not humans.
I do think
in
that
some way,
Jeff, that
they're
the
like
Waldorf
not
school,
normal humans.
I think the Waldorf school brags about the fact that Jeff Bezos went to a Waldorf school, which you know, whatever. So, but okay, so
he became weird more recently. I think
that's true. But so maybe that was just this phenomenal amount of power and wealth that, you know, it kind of makes everyone messed up. So the thing that Rudolf Steiner would talk about is he would say, what I don't. And this is like more of a modern perspective, maybe like Steiner never really talked about it, but sort of Steiner scholars talk about the fact that the idea is that, you know how people reach in midlife, they have a midlife crisis where they have this, maybe in their 50s, have this crazy, they're looking for a second act and they're like, their sense of purpose and stuff. They said the burnout, the idea of like preventing burnout is that, and they even put this in their sort of, propaganda, like, or their you know, advertising materials. We're trying to train your student, your child to have a lifelong love of learning, so that they will feel like enriched in a sense of wonder, no matter what age they are, no matter what point they are in their sort of career journey. And I do think that in and of itself, whether it's effective or not, is still, you know, is out for debate, but at least the attempt to try to instill in them a sense of wonder and a sense of love of learning. That's what sold me, and that's why I sent my kids there.
Absolutely,
you know,
absolutely.
It's a sweet thing, you know. And so, like their whole thing is, hey, you can teach a 3-year-old how to read, and you can jam material into them, and they can memorize it. You know, in fact, what sold to me was one of the teachers said, "Imagine you have this barrel, and is the teacher's job to fill the barrel with sticks and then put a lid on it and try to keep as many sticks in the barrel for the child, if the child is a barrel? Or is the child a little bundle of sticks and the teacher's job is to help them learn to ignite their own the potential to offer back to others? Like to light the bundle of sticks on fire so that they can provide like light and heat for the group, as opposed to just like hoarding the sticks, you know, hoarding the material. And it sold me, and I know that's a little bit pedantic, but yeah, that's kind of a cool idea.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of, I've been thinking about this a lot too. Just the idea of, like the purpose of developing yourself is to be a contributing person to a
Yeah.
society,
Yeah.
right? Like, and that's kind of what you just described there. There just does seem to be this fundamental difference between people, and I say fundamental because I feel like I don't know how it starts, but it does feel like it dictates so much of how people live. It's just like there's people who fundamentally believe in society and the collective good and the idea of like I think we've talked about this before. There's people, I think most of us don't like the idea of other people suffering. And you take an issue like college, free college, right? And you have some people, or healthcare, and you have some people that go, yeah, we should have that because I want a society where everybody feels like they can get sick and they're not worried about their bills and they can be educated. I want to be amongst educated people. And if you want to go to college, it should be free, whatever. And then there's the other people that are like, and then also, like bombings on the other side of the world, like it's like, that's horrible, right? And then there's this other strain of person that's just like, why should I care about that? It doesn't affect me. Like, I
Mm.
don't understand why you care about that. It doesn't affect you.
Hmm.
You hear that. You hear people say that. Like,
Yeah.
that's a thing you run into. And those same people are the same ones that go free college. Yeah, I'm not paying for that. Like, why would I pay for other people
Mm.
or healthcare? Like there's this sort of one strain of thinking and that it's just like, who's going to pay for it? Like, I like that idea, but I'm not paying for it,
Yeah.
right? And then there's other people that are like, I would happily pay for that.
You know
And
what's
it feels like a fundamental difference between just like a fundamental mindset difference between two types of people.
I'm going to inject like a little squirt of a catalyst into that, just because I'm going to use the term or investigate globalization.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that Steiner talked about in a lecture was this idea that the workers at the factory were rolling tobacco that was
Mm-hmm.
grown in, let's say, Cuba
Mm-hmm.
and then brought over.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in the 30s, and it was during a time when German scientists were inventing pesticides and herbicides and things. And they would send them over to Cuba and they'd spray them on
Mm-hmm.
the tobacco because it's a cash crop and it's extremely valuable and you don't want bugs to eat But
Mm-hmm.
then the workers were just spraying it on without any protective gear. So they were exposing
Yeah.
themselves to carcinogens. And then the workers in the
Right.
factory were spending the entire day absorbing those chemicals into their fingers because they didn't want to wear
Right.
gloves. It was
Right.
hard to
Yeah. Yeah.
manipulate the
Yeah.
stuff. So Steiner was like, this is a great example of where the people who, as you say, like the people who are sending the chemicals to Cuba,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
they want to protect the profits. So they want to protect the plant from the bugs.
Yeah.
And they don't care about the workers. And in Cuba, one of the reasons we grow it out of Germany is, well, because you can, but also because the laws there won't prohibit you
Mm-hmm.
from using the chemical. And then
Right.
when it comes back to Germany, no one's testing at the border as it arrives that there's pesticides laden in the
Mm-hmm.
tobacco and
Right.
will affect the workers' fingers, or will it be absorbed into their body? So he said this is a great example of where globalization falls apart, because if your
Mm-hmm.
neighbor down the street was getting sick from spraying the tobacco, you'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
holy shit, then I touched the tobacco. Oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
we're all should think about not using the herbicide, right?
Yeah.
But if it's in Cuba, that there's this disconnect between what
Right.
happens in
Right.
Cuba, what happens in Germany, and everyone loses. In other words,
Yeah.
and who only person who
Yeah.
gains is the corporation who has more profits.
Right. And I think that it's interesting, like that neighbor down the street. I mean, as we get even more and more atomicized, right?
Yeah.
Like even that neighbor down the street doesn't concern you at some
Right.
point,
Yeah. At
right?
some
Like
point, I'm thinking
there's a
more
lot
like,
of people that aren't even bothered by the neighbor down the street suffering. It's just like, it's not in my house, right? Like
yeah. I
it's
was
just
thinking more back to
this weird mindset that some people have.
we
I
had
think it's
this
weird,
early division
but
of
it
labor
feels
where
like that's a fundamental split
imagine we
between
have a
people.
little town in I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
1200 London, 1200 AD London, right?
Yeah.
And you've got you've got like the guy with his wooden sign out that says I'm a shoemaker. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's a butcher, and the shoemaker buys leather from the butcher, skin from the butcher, and tans it. Or there's a tanner,
Mm-hmm.
So this
Mm-hmm.
division of labor thing, and when it's that small, if
Hmm.
if like for instance the hat people say Matt is a hatter. The
Yeah.
hatters used to use mercury to make this
Hmm.
felt stiff. And they
Right.
all went fucking crazy. And so people would say
Hmm.
Matt is a hatter. Like, so that's the point is like, they like, I wonder why all
Hmm.
the hatters are crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe it's some chemical they're using that's making them sick. And so then there's that feedback loop that's right away, there's
Yeah.
something wrong.
Yeah,
Whereas
like
if,
when you have local businesses, they have an investment in the local community, and if
yeah,
somebody's getting sick from your business or at their
it's
business,
more
like it's like,
obvious.
oh shit, that's happening in our town
Yeah,
from our town, right?
yeah,
Versus like some mega corporation that has a factory in the rainforest, that mows down like a part of the rainforest to create a rubber factory or something, or
right.
rubber
You
plantation or
can
some
imagine a
shit, right?
corporation saying, let's
Like,
open up a town in India where they just make hats. And then
yeah,
no one will see the hatters going
nobody will
crazy.
see the mercury poisoning
Yeah,
because it's over there,
exactly.
right?
It's kind of so. I
Yeah,
think
I mean,
that's
it's
part of
just.
what you're talking about, though, is that we've become the globalization made it harder to see and have the feedback loop of what
I
I
think
do
the
affects.
global, yeah, I mean, I think the globalization might be a symptom of that same mindset of just like, I don't really care about other people. Like, why should I care? It doesn't affect me. And so they had that mindset. So they were sort of inspired to engineer the world where they didn't have to see the suffering or other people. Maybe it's like, I don't know. I just think that kind of like the urge to build that world comes from that same mindset.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know, the motivation to build the world where you don't have to see it. You don't, and it's out of sight, out of mind. I don't know. I just been thinking about it a lot because I feel like we're in this moment where like um
Well, can I
so the
interrupt you and
French
say,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
say, well, one reason I'm thinking about it is because the president of the United States recently, yesterday, said
Hmm.
we're going to leave and we don't need the oil in the Strait of Hormuz. So let
Yeah,
the
yeah,
people who need it come and open it up again.
yeah,
And it's just like,
yeah.
oh my God, idiot. Like, he obviously didn't pay attention in economics 101.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, he just like he's fundamentally lazy. He just wants to get out of there
Yeah.
because he didn't
He knows that
he
it's
didn't he didn't
unpopular.
anticipate that it was going to be a quagmire,
Right.
right?
And
Like he was
that how
too dumb
unpopular. Yeah.
to and like everything else he like we don't hear about Greenland anymore because that became a difficult thing. Like it became a point of stress and tension and complexity. And once things become sort of complicated, he doesn't have any tolerance for it anymore, right?
Plus, it
So
was like 95% of Americans said we don't want to militarily invade Greenland.
right.
95%. So like there was like
But like
5%
he
of this
doesn't
like
care about that. He really doesn't care about that, honestly. He's like in his mind, it's like I think what happened was it started to get more and more real.
right.
Like
Yeah.
and
How would
and
you
then it
actually
was
do it?
like here's what would happen if you did that. And then it was like lots of complexity and bad consequences. And it was like, oh wait, that's too much. Like I can't wrap.
Yeah.
Oh well, it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think they fucked up. They it's like he's like a toddler who dumped a bunch of garbage around and was like, oh now there's a garbage around. Okay, bye.
Have you ever had a
Right? He
corporate
doesn't want. He didn't realize that it was going to create a big pile of garbage.
right, right. Have you ever had an experience in the corporate world where
Yeah.
your boss or your boss's boss just was so out of sync or out of resonance with what the team actually needed, and your job was to go try to sort of
Yeah.
explain to them why
Yeah.
their viewpoint was just idiotic, but without making them feel like an idiot? Like, have you ever had that experience?
Absolutely.
It's brutal.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I had that experience with my stepfather too. It's like he was sort of a broken person and an abusive guy, but like I was 17 or 16 at the time, and I recognized that it came from like his own brokenness, like
Hmm.
his abusive behavior. I could see was a symptom of, and part of it is just maybe like this is how maybe I'm like too much of the peacemaker empathy guy, like overly empathetic. But I remember sort of feeling like, uh, getting a little bit like my family would sort of see like, why aren't you protecting it? Why aren't you taking our side? Like, why are you why are you defending that guy kind of thing? Right.
I
Like,
see. Yeah.
but I would sort of be like, well, for him, it's coming like he's a broken dude. Like it's obvious, like he doesn't want to be like this. Like that was obvious to me, but he
Interesting.
was
Yeah.
abusive. But a lot of what I found myself doing was interpreting his abuse, like saying, well, like he did this because that, and here's how we work around that, and
Wow.
here's how we avoid that. Here's
Yeah.
how we, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of like what you're describing in the boss situation. You have a bad boss,
Yeah.
and everybody's like trying to figure out, oh, what he meant was this, or
Right.
what
Yeah.
we should really do is this, and that will actually serve his goal. Like he has this other goal in mind. He just doesn't know how to execute it.
Yeah.
But if we do this, then he will be happy, even though that's not specifically what he asked for. So you're doing all this work as an employee. And people do that with Trump all the time. Well, like what he meant was this, right? Or like, so crazy.
I had a
But I
boss.
was thinking of, yeah, go ahead.
I had
Sorry.
a boss. Sorry, I had a boss who taught me when I first got there. My first thing was I joked to my boss, who was
Yeah.
a Pakistani immigrant, and he was
Mm-hmm.
a highly intelligent guy. But he was he said, you know, he kept using the word align. Like really, really,
Mm-hmm.
the most important thing is to align with your stakeholders, right? Like that's just
Mm-hmm.
such a big deal. And so I
Yeah.
came to him after like
It's
three
a big
months,
corporate word.
and I said,
Yeah.
"Hey, man, what you didn't tell me is I should have gone to receive a master's in family counseling because that's my job. Like I'm
Yeah.
just doing family
Yeah.
counseling like the whole day long, and I'm like, what
Yeah.
the fuck?" And he's like, he
Yeah.
laughed and laughed, and he said, "Yeah." He goes, I'll tell you something. When you're writing an email or trying to get one of the leaders to do something, you're
Yeah.
going to want to use three terms. You're going to want
Yeah.
to say that the project will be on time and on budget, and that will maximize profits.
Uh-huh.
He goes, just as long as that's in the email, they're going to be like,
Yeah.
we were taught in business school to check the fucking box because that's all we care
Right.
about, you know? And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
on time, on budget, and we're going to maximize profits, or we're going to help.
Yeah.
We're going to help our affiliates maximize profits. That's what he said. Your project's going to be on time, on budget, and we're going to help our affiliates maximize profits. And it was like, as long as you put that in there, they were like, dude, of course, that's what we want, you know?
Yeah.
Point and grunt, right? Point and
No.
grunt.
Right.
More money, you know, like less, more. Sorry.
Yeah.
You were going to say
Is the
something.
line going up?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I think what I was going to say is sort of back on what I was saying before, which is like just this fundamental difference between people and people who believe in society and people who don't. I was thinking about the fact that so I was reading Richard Rorty, political philosopher, a little while ago, and he has this essay on fraternity, like, and he has this essay called "Looking Back from the World 2096," and sort of he imagines this sort of like, you know, renewed America that's gone through this rough time. And Richard Rorty was sort of he became famous, or a lot of people were talking about him in 2016 when Trump was elected, because back in like 19 in the 90s, Richard Rorty had written an essay that basically kind of was very prescient about like, this is what's going to happen with the American working class. They're going to feel, you know, like abandoned and disillusioned, and they're going to vote for a strong man and blah blah blah. So people start paying attention. Like Richard. Anyway, I became curious about Richard Rorty at that time. I had never read him before, but he has this essay called "Looking Back from the year 2096,"
Mhm.
and he kind of imagines the U.S. has gone through this rough sort of fascist period and that's come out of it. Very interesting. Um, but like one of the things he talks about is how Americans embrace, like one of the things that they embraced as they came out of this bad period was fraternity. And I was thinking about how the French have that in their like their national slogan or whatever, liberty, equality, fraternity.
Hmm.
And we talk a lot about liberty and equality in America. Like those are words that come up a lot
Yeah.
in like liberty, especially on the right, equality more on the left. And those
Hmm.
two things are kind of in tension with each other sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes equality has some lives in tension with liberty. But we never talk about fraternity.
Hmm.
And I just thought that was kind of interesting. And what he means by that is basically like solidarity, right? Like,
Mhm.
and then there was a recent article in the Atlantic by Adam Serwer, you know, Adam Serwer, who wrote the Cruelty is the Point. He got that article some
Oh,
years
yeah.
ago,
Yeah.
and that kind of went viral. So he's a good writer. I like his work, but he had a piece about kind of like the people of Minneapolis. This is a few months ago. People in Minneapolis, how the sort of the networks of aid that have formed there, of help and looking out for your neighbor, and just like ice watch patrols and people like, you know, how ICE that keeps dropping off people from detention, like in the middle of nowhere without their coats and stuff. And so there's like the people that pick, you know, that go and make sure those people get home and get warm and blah, blah, blah. Right. And there's food drives and school watches and all these things like that have sprung up in Minneapolis. Well, the word that Serwer uses for that is neighborism.
Neighborism. I like it. Huh.
And I just like neighborism, solidarity, fraternity. Like I love the idea that we would build a politics around that. But then I was thinking about like, what is the obstacle to that? And the obstacle to that, to me, going back again, seems to be just that fundamental thing that differentiates people. There's some people that just think like, why would I care about that? It doesn't affect me. It just seems like there's a weird thing that some people have where that's just their mindset. And I don't know what you do with that mindset. Do you just say, all right, we need to decide that that is a minority of people and the rest of us are okay with society and neighborism and solidarity. Like we
Mhm.
believe in that. And we're just going to build that despite those fucking people because there's fewer of them. Or is it so fundamental that you have to kind of just like, you know, you have to just sort of push that aside and build what you want? Or is it not really fundamental? Is it a thing it's that back to your question of nature versus nurture? Like, is that a thing that makes those people different? Is that just a different mindset that's endemic to them that they fundamentally have? Or is it something they learned? Like, did they learn at some point to be like, why would I care about that? It doesn't affect me. Is that something they were propagandized into believing, in which case you know, they're theoretically persuadable. Like you could persuade them that no, like solidarity, society, fraternity with your fellow man, not just your household. Like that's a good thing. Like to care about society at large is a good thing. I don't know if those people I don't know how fundamental that mindset is, I
Well,
guess is what I'm
it
saying.
makes me think. First of all, it sparked when you were talking about your stepfather, and
Mm-hmm.
in that microcosm of the household, and you know, this small community, he was one
Mm-hmm.
of a member of what, 4 or 5 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And you identified that he was a wounded person and was acting out of like unintentionally behaving in a way that where his coping mechanisms were overriding any kind of feelings of empathy or sort of
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
communal altruism. I would say, imagine going back to when we were hunter gatherers, and let's say we lived in a valley that was very fertile and it was easy to grow. So that's dumb. I mean, obviously, we're just moving from hunter gatherers to agrarian
Mm-hmm.
society. That's probably the most
Mm-hmm.
important moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we have enough. Like there's enough game in the forest, and there's enough fertile soil next to the river to grow plenty. Like enough for 2 tribes, right? And our tribe feels abundant, and they don't worry that there's not enough. And now there's a tribe in the valley next door that doesn't have enough,
Mm-hmm.
and those people come wandering in,
Mm-hmm.
and half of the people in our tribe, I'm just going to guess, some of them, some
Yeah.
segment of the society says like, "Oh shit, I'm worried we won't have enough if they keep coming
Mm-hmm.
in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's prevent them from coming in. Let's attack them, kill them. Let's
Mm-hmm.
try to make sure we have
Let's
enough."
keep them out.
And
Yeah.
another group was like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Like we have plenty. There's plenty of food
Yeah.
here. Like let's let them come in. Like
Right.
we'll enrich
Right.
our fabric of
Like
our
we'll
tribe."
have less, but nobody will die.
Or even that I don't think we're going to have less because we have enough.
But even if that's the question, I think that's like there's a lot of people who have a tolerance for like I'm willing to have a little less
right.
so that other people don't die.
Right. Well, which is like Canadian social medicine. Like, you know, like
Yeah, yeah.
to say like, I'll pay more taxes. Like I make this argument that when I was working for Roche
Mm-hmm.
and they were paying 30 grand for
Mm-hmm.
my healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't, I mean, they were taking it out of my paycheck and paying it, that
Mm-hmm.
was a tax that was, if you took my 32% federal income tax plus the
Mm-hmm.
30 grand, that was like a 65% tax, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
on my income.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you
Mm-hmm.
go to Canada and it's like, oh, we pay 65% taxes, but we have free college,
But we
free
have
social.
all this stuff.
I would be like,
Yeah.
what the fuck?
We pay that, but we have
We don't
great
get the
bombs.
shit. We have great
Yeah, yeah.
bombs. So like
We have
that's a
amazing bombs.
great
Yeah.
example of you said I'll I'll receive a little bit less so that these people won't die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's the people who are like,
Yeah,
check
there's
the
just
box. That's
other people
awesome. I
that
love
just
it.
like would never accept that argument. There's other people. That's what I'm, and that's what I don't know. Like your example is really good. Like in that clan with those two neighboring clans, like that one set of people that's just like, no, 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 keep those people out. Fuck them. Let's kill them. Whatever. Like I get that it's maybe there's an element of like this feeling of scarcity in that or whatever. I don't know. I don't know
Do
what
you,
that is.
did you have this thing? I
I just
remember
don't
my,
know like how fundamental it seems selfish to me. Uh and I think a lot of those people who today would say, yeah, it's selfish. That's how we all are. That's how we all should be. Like they wouldn't have trouble with the idea that it's selfish because they think that, yeah, that's, of course it's selfish. Like that's how we should live in the world,
right.
right? Like it just seems like a fundamental difference.
I wonder though, because I'm going back to your analogy of your stepfather. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
one of the people in the tribe one of the older people had gone through a famine.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew the pain of people dying of hunger, and they just were
Yeah.
they were like, never again. We're not going to do that again. Like, I
Right.
just don't want to
Right.
ever see that again. So
Yeah.
let's say that that's their perspective, and they cannot see that they're abundant.
Mm-hmm.
We're abundant enough to help those coming in from the valley next
Mm-hmm.
door.
Mm-hmm.
How, in some ways, like how, as politically, because it sounded like you really saw empathetically that your stepfather was coming from a wounded place.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel obligated to, you said maybe you were the peacemaker, but did you feel sort of obligated to politically try to help him shift, or was that not part of the dynamic? Because that's
Like on some level, but it was like, but I guess the way I thought about it at the time was like, I'm a kid and I can't, like, I can maybe manipulate the situation to influence him a little bit.
Mhm.
But I can't like directly influence him.
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I felt like I might be able to have some indirect influence on how he thinks about stuff and how he operates and how he how the world feels to him or whatever. But like I felt like I can only do that indirectly. Otherwise, like I'm just a kid. He's not going to listen to me or whatever. You know what I mean?
In some ways,
I
that
don't know. I don't
analogy,
know if that's kind of answers your
well,
question, but
that's how I feel like as a political being.
yeah.
Like I've tried to influence and increase votership. I've tried to do things.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to convince union members to not vote for Trump. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I watched my friends spend hundreds of hours in interviewing candidates and then labeling them labor endorsed candidates, not
Yeah.
any party,
Yeah.
just labor endorsed
Right.
candidates, because they're politicians who say, I will support labor and unions and contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in some ways, like I think like I've felt the helplessness of not being able to really
Yeah.
help the people that cannot.
Well, that's why this question of what's fundamental comes to mind for me, because I often think of these issues like the unions or whatever as like, that's like a proxy argument for what the real fundamental problem is.
Yeah.
And so like, this is why I'm really interested in what the fundamental thing is. Cause I think about like this notion of like say healthcare or college or just any kind of safety net thing or whatever, just helping your neighbor, and the people who say, I don't want to pay for that. And then like the arguments that they'll use sometimes is like, well, if you take my money, if the government takes my money, like the government's bad at stuff, right? Like if we have government healthcare, the government sucks at doing things. So like, I don't want to give the government my money to provide healthcare. And so you end up arguing about whether the government's good at things.
Mhm.
And so like then you're no longer at the fundamental argument, right? Because what I want to be able to say is, all right, in a world where the government was like, if we agreed, like just for the sake of argument, that the government was good at it, what then? Like, would you support it then?
Right.
And they wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
Right. It's like, or they might just say, well, it's not good at things, so we're not going to talk about that. Right.
I just don't believe you that
it's really hard to sometimes get to the fundamental question of like, do you care about helping those people? Like, so the government's bad at it. Like if you could invent a different way to help those people that wasn't the government, where maybe you had to pay a little bit,
Yeah.
and there was an entity that was really good at it, would you be willing to sacrifice a little bit to make sure everybody was taken care of, right? Like that feels like the fundamental question.
So Bernie
And
Sanders,
people will like really work hard to avoid those fundamental questions because it makes themselves look bad. Like it's like,
right? No, no,
because
no.
they don't want to find that part of themselves that says, no, I don't care about those people.
I mean,
Like they don't want to be pushed into that corner.
right. So like Bernie Sanders will use that exact same methodology to try to convince people about single payer healthcare. He'd say, you look for something that's working and scale it up.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the VA. Families who, I mean, veterans, families who are part of the VA say, wow, it's the best healthcare I've ever had. They're really great doctors. They pay well. The doctors are happy. People I know who are studying to become surgeons are like, everyone wants to get a job at the VA. That's the way, that's the place you want to go in Tucson.
Yeah.
And so Bernie Sanders said, well, if we can do it, if the government can do it for veterans and their families, can't we just scale it up for everyone else? Like why is that so hard to imagine?
Right.
And your point is people don't want to hear.
No, yeah, they don't.
They just don't want to hear that.
And then they will latch onto proxy arguments that aren't the real argument. They'll start to say, well, the VA isn't good at stuff. And then you're in this other debate about whether the VA is good or isn't good. And then you're not really talking about the thing that you are trying to actually argue about. And the same thing with like voting, right? Like the SAVE Act, right? So like, it seems to me the fundamental question is, should voting be easier or should it be harder? Right.
Right.
Like, and then the people who go, if you go and you say that to somebody who supports the SAVE Act, their answer wouldn't be an answer to that question. Their answer would be something like, well, if we make it easier, then illegals are voting, right? Like tons of illegals are voting because it's too easy. And then you're in this debate about whether illegals are voting. And it's like, they're not voting. Illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants aren't voting. And then you're in a debate about like, yes, they are, no, they aren't. And you're trying to show them data. And now you're suddenly distracted. You've gone off on this dumb proxy tangent to the fundamental question of should voting be easier or harder? And their reasoning for why it should be harder is based on some fucking lie that then you're in this dumb quagmire of debating with them about the lie that they're, that they're invested in, instead of like back to that. You just want to get to that fundamental question of like, should voting be easier or harder? And you spend all your energy in this debate about whether illegal immigrants are voting.
So,
or undocumented immigrants.
I had an interesting.
It's infuriating.
I was discussing, with my wife who listens to the show. Hey, baby. We were discussing on the trip about how many. What's the actual number of people who voted fraudulently, and what percentage of? So she was like, we were talking about the numbers, and she was like, I think it's like 0.02%. And I was like, I think it's a lot. Like, I think it's like by a factor of 15 less than that. And so I looked it up. The Heritage Foundation, which is one of the most conservative.
It's like 17 people in the last 7 years.
Yeah,
in the last 20 years or something.
And it was like
that.
0.000000325. And the thing is like, so once you bring that up. But
this is what I hate, because you end up in that debate and then the other person just goes, I don't believe that.
I don't believe that. And which is like, but the Heritage Foundation, those are your people. Like those are
then you're in an argument about whether the Heritage Foundation is
MAGA.
You know
enough.
what I mean? Like
they're rhinos.
Each thing you end up with takes you one step away from the thing you're trying to talk about, which is like.
There was a point during the podcast where you said, we're in the 2096, we're looking back on a period where we became fascist. And I would say pre-Civil War and post-Civil War during the Reconstruction, we were fucking fascist. Like we made rules that if you were a former slave and black, you couldn't vote. It's not like we're going. It's like what we're talking about is a continuation of an impulse to be absolutely fucking fascist, like just genocides of indigenous people, like genocides of slaves. So like,
I mean,
in many ways,
in some ways, it's just part of the same story with the veil ripped off a little bit, right? Like we've had Jim Crow, we had slavery, we've had internment camps, we had genocide of indigenous peoples, we've had something like 100 instances where we've tried to overthrow other governments,
Yeah. Yeah.
in modern history.
Yeah. Modern
So
history.
like, there, this is not, like it's like in a lot of ways that what we're experiencing now isn't really an exception to anything. It's just the veil has ripped off a little
Yeah.
bit more, and so we see it for what it is or what it has always been. Like there is an aspect of that for sure.
Well, and I would even pause and
We're
say,
seeing the current. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say that there was no veil in 1961. You know what I mean? Like there were
Well, yeah, and
lynchings and
like
people, there were like
people of color say that all the time. Like
governors who
what you think you're seeing now is just how we've always seen it.
yeah. And
Yeah,
there was a
yeah.
period
So
of like a sort of
yeah.
a period of enlightenment, maybe during the
Hmm.
late 80s and 90s, where it
Hmm.
became socially unacceptable to like praise and clap about a lynching. You know what I mean?
Right,
Or
right.
like, Tulsa massacre or something. There was a
Yeah,
period
yeah.
in time where people were just like, huh, Tulsa, a bunch of people bombed the black businesses. And
If people knew about it at
if
all.
people even knew about it, right?
Hmm.
But the people who lived in Tulsa, the white people that did it, they were like, this is just and justified, and we're not going to go to jail
Hmm.
for it. But oh my
Yeah, yeah.
God. And so
Hmm.
it's an interesting thing. Like we certainly, what we've arrived at is actually, because we went to a light place to a dark place. And I'm going to
Hmm.
actually, this Harvard intellectual, Steven Pinker,
Yeah, yeah.
the curly white hair dude. And
Yeah,
we always,
he's in the Epstein files
is he really? Okay. All right. A lot of people are.
quite a bit.
I
But
bet,
anyway,
yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
And my wife and I were watching a couple of his lectures, and I said,
Hmm.
"Wow, the guy is. I mean, he's definitely. I'm not going to say on the spectrum, but he's definitely seems like." I made a joke to my wife where I was like, "I wonder if when he's having sex with his partner, if he's sort of like talking like about data and like, hey, these hormones are like this oxytocin has reached
I
such
can
and such a
imagine
level."
that with him. Yeah,
You know what I
sure.
mean? But
Yeah, yeah.
the reason I bring him up is because he has this persistent desire to point to the
Hmm.
fact that things are getting better.
Yeah, but
Like data.
he
Yeah,
uses a pretty
yeah,
narrow set of metrics,
he
and
does. Yeah.
by his scales, yeah, things are getting better.
Like he'll say,
Eh,
per capita
Yeah,
violence and murder on the planet is dwindling at a steady line, going down, down,
absolutely.
down, down.
I mean, I wouldn't go back to a world where there wasn't anesthesia.
Right. Yeah. Or
I don't
yeah.
want to, right? Like I get what he's saying,
But
but
Israel,
I also think his argument is a little too narrow in a lot of ways. Like
like Israel just passed a
he's
law.
yeah,
Speaking
the
of
apartheid law that they just passed.
that you
Yeah,
can hang a Palestinian but not an
yeah,
Israeli for acts against the country, like for
right.
protesting,
And then
basically.
no right of appeal and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
So
in some ways
yeah.
that's like Jim Crow, like that's like
Hmm.
lynching in America, right? It's just
Hmm.
in across the sea. I'm sorry, but yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so I often find myself in more and more these days just like really interested in what is the actual fundamental crux of this whole thing. Like in human being, it feels like it's in human beings somewhere. There's a fundamental crux that like we end up in a lot of layers of we end up mired in policy debates and other things that feel to me increasingly like they are steps removed from what the crux of the thing is. And I keep finding, and I don't know why it's useful, why it feels like a useful thing to figure out, but it does feel like
I'm 100% aboard with you, and I'm I could be self-critical and say like I tend to oversimplify things and try to go down to the lowest prime numbers. So for me, when
mhm,
you say that, I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
yeah,
I think of projecting it onto the original theme of the show, which is the constant and the variant, and this idea
mhm,
of like how do we have a genetic material that is
mhm,
stable enough,
yeah,
to be considered. And then we have this sort of other inputs that affect the way we view the world. And I even
mhm,
went back to that idea of like, I think the tribe had a segment that was abundance minded and ones
mhm.
that were, what's the word, the opposite,
And even within those, like you mentioned, like that one person that went through famine, like I feel like I can explain that person. And I do see people like that. And I go, okay, I get why they are arguing that, we shouldn't take care of those people, whatever. Like I can, for that one person, for that one individual, I can see it. But there's plenty of exceptions to the rule where I'm like, I just don't, like, I don't see why those people are being, why that seems like the right, why that person doesn't seem to have any interest in caring about other people at all. Like I don't, You know what I mean? Like sometimes you can explain it, and a lot of times it's just like, or just like another interesting character trait that I'm fascinated with is this need for closure, need for cognitive closure, right? Like
Mm,
the need for certainty in things, right? And
yeah.
so I see that a lot, and I think that the internet feeds those people really well. Like you find your answer to things, and these is like this aversion to complexity and complex questions and ambiguity, and the idea that we just don't know this or that, like we're not certain about this. Like I'm thinking about things in terms of probabilities and in nuanced ways. Like there's a lot of people who have no tolerance for that at all. They need things to be black and white. You know, they're the kind of person that they go, well, oh, you hate Trump. Well, you must love Biden. It's like, no, you can have degrees of dislike. Like that's a thing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
some people that just like, they can't understand the world except in black and white terms of absolute certainty. And that, you know, they've identified, there's a trait that has been identified. There's a neurological trait that where the people's brains are different. Like some people have a need for closure, and other people have a need for what they call a need for cognition. They like to think about stuff.
Mhm.
And they can see this in people's brains at a physiological level. But then so you go, okay, well, is that just like is that a constant or is that a variant?
Mhm.
Like, do people develop that? Because, you know, they're both useful in some sense. Like if you just have a need for cognition and you like to think about it, then you never take action. You're just always sort of like the analysis paralysis
Mhm.
mode, right? You
Mhm.
and 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 so you need those certainty people to be like, no, we should do this, you know? So like it does make sense that some humans would have one and some humans would have the other. But like they each have a big downside as well. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm super fascinated with what is the constant,
Yeah. Um,
what actually is the constant.
Here's an interesting, and this is a weave, but I think it makes sense. And so I was watching a mini documentary about sort of the story that we never really hear. We always hear about Hernan Cortez walking into Mexico City,
Hmm.
Tenochtitlan, and then taking over. We don't hear about like what led up to it, the multiple sort of battles like with Mayan
Hmm.
groups and stuff. So they
Yeah.
had these guys coming from Cuba, and they set out and they land on the Yucatan Peninsula. And the first Mayan towns they enter, they find the temple in the middle with a whole bunch of sacrificial humans, so with their hearts cut out, like
Mm.
lying on the temple stairs, and they're just horrified. Like they're like, "Oh my God, these savages just they sacrifice their humans." Right? This is a
Hmm.
time, if I'm not wrong, when in Spain, the Spanish Inquisition was like fucking torturing the shit out of anybody that looked the wrong way or didn't,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
don't know, whatever happened. I don't know why, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and they looked at this and they said, "Oh my God, it's so hedonistic and gross." And if
Hmm.
the Mayans look back, they'd be like, "Oh my God, they just bring everyone in and burn them and
Hmm.
torture them for no fucking
Yeah.
reason."
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
you think of it that way, like the Mayans, for some
Yeah.
whatever reason, they were like, when we sacrifice these people, we get the crops and the
Hmm.
theocracy. The theocracy somehow over generations and generations
Yeah.
convinced them that that's the way to do it. I don't know. I would
Yeah.
love to
Well, it's
examine
just
the
like
moment.
people are, there's like this, it's like a lack of self-awareness, right? That people naturally have.
Right.
And you see like comical versions of it with religion where you see like Christians will be like that, those beliefs that those people have are so weird, right?
Right, right, right.
And then you go like, dude, you think you eat this bread and it turns into
Yeah.
Jesus's flesh, and
Or that this teenage or that this
you
teenage
believe in
girl.
that Jesus was the Son of God, but he's also God, and then there's two other gods, but it's all one God. It's the Father, Son,
I
and Holy
always say
Spirit, and
that
there's
that
three of them,
Mary.
but it's really just one. And Jesus was the Son, but he's also the same person. Like that's weird, dude.
I always say
Like
that there is one teenage girl in human history that got
yeah,
pregnant out of wedlock and then was able to convince her parents that she didn't have
right,
sex. Like no, like there
right,
has
yeah,
never been a teenage girl that got pregnant that was like, "Mom and Dad, I swear it was just the tip." Like he didn't even
right.
like he didn't ejaculate and
I saw this angel, and it said to me.
You're going to
Yeah.
be pregnant. And then it was just the tip. Like, you cannot,
Yeah.
it's unfathomable to believe that one teenage girl was able to convince billions of people that she didn't have
it's just that
sex.
thing you're talking about, because there's so many Christians that look at some other beliefs, even within Christianity, they'll look at like Mormons and be like, those people are so weird. It's
Right,
like,
totally.
yeah, Mormons are fucking weird, but like, have you looked at your own beliefs?
Yeah. No, it's a really
Anyway,
interesting question, and I think there's a bunch of layers. But if going back to this idea that if we simplify by saying Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everyone has that in some degree going on in their mind. Like, they're worried about taking a breath, food, water, and then all these other things, and then you project that onto their family of origin and their genetics. So they've got this, they've a predilection for being afraid of uncertainty or of seeing the world. What's the opposite of abundance? It's a lack. It's a
scarcity.
Scarcity consciousness. It's like abundance consciousness or scarcity consciousness. And I don't know if you were to segment the society, like, if is it 50-50, is it 30-70, and how much of that drives this idea that, like, I can live in America and I don't want to pay more taxes, and I'm happy that these guys who are strongmen are buying bombs and dropping them on some evil country, so that I can feel safe, because that's really the sales pitch, is that I'm making you safe by having this war.
Yeah,
that was the sales pitch, really.
I mean, yeah.
If I don't do it, they're going to have an ICBM.
I don't know how many people buying that shit, but yeah.
I don't either, but that was the sales pitch. I mean, that
was the pitch. Yeah, that was one of the several pitches that
it got a little convoluted. Yeah. Totally. Anyway, this is a good episode.
Brother.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening. Satellite Haiku.
Peace out.
Peace out.
Satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.